Brilliant. Okay. Well, look at that lovely screen about word power. The brilliant people at Bookmark have put these little graphics together and I think they look fab. So thank you, Bookmark. That looks so nice and really jolly. I can't wait to hear what we say.
Me too.
So huge welcome to everybody for joining us for this Word Power webinar. This is the final one of our autumn series. If you've missed any of the other ones, don't panic. They are on our Chatterstars YouTube channel. So do go and check those out. They're all about 30 minutes with some Q&A at the end. And I hope that there's been a whole raft of interesting, useful ideas for you to boost reading and boost vocabulary with your children in whatever setting you are familiar as a parent, as a teacher, as a tutor. These are really applicable for everybody. So thank you for joining us for this last one. And let's just share what we're going to be looking at. So we're going to spend sort of 25-30 minutes looking at the author's language choice and the nuance behind it, and how that affects how we understand story and how we get engaged with narrative. We're going to have a look at how reading promotes the ability to really pinpoint that nuance, because nuance actually is a hugely important element of all our assessment points throughout our English education system. But also, more importantly, it's a hugely vital element to our well-being, our ability to express ourselves, our ability to communicate and have the precise meaning attached to what it is we're feeling. And then we're finally going to have a look at some examples of language choice and how you might want to explore these with your children. Let me just let those other people in quickly. Just 1 second, everybody, while I just triple check that we've tried to allow people to bypass the lobby. Yes, I did do that. Microsoft Teams, I did do that.
You did do that. We saw you.
Okay. So Laura and I are going to sort of tag team through these next few slides and hopefully give you a really good overview of all of those elements around word power. Before we do that, let me tell you a little story, because frankly, it all comes back to story when we're looking at trying to boost word power, when we're trying to boost a powerful voice and our ability to read and express ourselves. It all comes back to story. And this is a really interesting story from the former poet laureate in America, a guy called Billy Collins. And he was invited along to the White House in America, I think by Barack Obama. And he was invited along to talk to a group of students, a group of young children about poetry and how he writes his poetry and how he gets his ideas and how he expresses what he wants to say. And somebody asked him, one of the children asked him, how do you find your voice? How do you find that voice that comes across in your poetry? And Billy Collins said, you have to look inside yourself for your motivation, for your ideas. But actually, you look outside yourself as well. Your voice is lying in other people's poetry. Your voice is lying on the shelves of the library. It's lying in the books that surround you when you are in that library or when you're in spaces where there's lots and lots of books. And that really resonates with me because in all of my experiences throughout education, we are, of course, fascinated and involved in other people's writing all of the time. You know, I'm an English teacher. I've taught English for over 20 years. And it's the heartbeat of what we do in the English classroom is exploring other people's poetry, exploring the shelves of the library. But actually, the specific reason for that, according to Billy Collins, is because that's where we find our voice. That's where we understand what we want to say. And I think that's a really fascinating element to start this webinar with, is that this is why we do it, because we're trying to amplify our own voice. And we do that by magpieing. Pi Corbett talks about magpieing ideas from other places. And it's the collation of those ideas in our own voice that gives us our ability to express our own unique view of the world and our own unique view of what we see around us. So don't forget that element to reading. Don't forget and don't underestimate the power of the role of reading and the role of understanding words and vocabulary and immersing ourselves in this word-rich environment, because actually that's where we find our voice. That's where that external source comes to life to allow us to really express our own thoughts and hopes and dreams and imaginings and all of the things that make life worth living and really vibrant. So I wanted to share that little story with you as a prefix to what we're going to look at in terms of word power. Lauren's going to take over for this bit.
Lovely. Thank you, Helen. That was a nice story. I got really engrossed in that then. So kind of building on what Helen's just been talking about, obviously words are really, really important, and we know that authors choose particular words for their meaning and to show different purposes. So we're going to explore a couple of ways in which they do this in children's literature, and kind of look at ways that you could explore it with children as well. So for this first slide, it's all about puns, jokes and double meanings, because what a fantastic way to start looking at vocabulary through something that's going to make children laugh and make them kind of explore those kind of funny things that just make them giggle. And that's what we want with reading, is we want them to feel enjoyment, and we want to kind of build that reading for pleasure. So I think it's a really great place to start, particularly jokes, because it's a great way to look at homophones, so words that look the same, sound the same, but have different meanings, and are sometimes spelt the same as well. So for example, the kind of the orange ones at the bottom, what did the chess piece say before bed? Night night. And it's just a funny way to kind of explore that. So you could say to the child, what does that mean, night night? And you know, they can hopefully pick out the two different meanings, the nighttime and the chess piece, the night, as well. So it's kind of looking at those sorts of things. And again, this one really made me laugh when I first found it. What's a cat's favorite button on a DVD remote? Pause. And I just thought that was really brilliant, and again might engage children that are really interested in animals as well. There's kind of those ideas, so on the bottom right of the slide, of those jokes that don't necessarily have the question and answer, but have the joke within the sort of statement. So I'm reading a book about gravity, I just can't put it down. And that's looking at, rather than looking at a particular word, that's looking rather at a phrase and thinking, well, why is that funny? If somebody said that, why is that amusing? Why might that make somebody laugh? And looking at that phrase, I just can't put it down, and how that links to gravity. So making those kind of links between phrases and different vocabulary and things as well. And obviously I chose reading based ones, clearly. So a novel fell on my head in the library the other day. I only have my shelf to blame, which again, a really silly kind of joke, a silly kind of pun there. But again, just exploring the use of language. Why did that author change the word self to shelf? Why have they done that? Why is that funny? And kind of just exploring those ideas with children. And there are so many jokes that you can do that with. I've also taken an extract from one of the Twinkle originals, The Bear Who Came to Babysit, which is one of the stories that we use in our online programme. And just in this little extract here, so I mean the book is fairly self-explanatory. It's about a bear who came to babysit, so the title does really well in explaining what's going on there. But it's just, I really liked this section here where, "We found you the perfect one," said Mike with a wink. "You're going to have a great time. You'll barely notice we're gone." And just looking at that little phrase, or even saying to the children, is there anything in that kind of section that really stands out to you? Is there a word or a phrase or something that makes you laugh or makes you go, oh, that's funny? You know, kind of just talking to them about it, and then exploring, well, why did that author choose to write barely? And also maybe discussing the picture at the same time as well. So it says in the text that Mike winked, but you can also see him clearly doing that in the picture as well, and then discussing the choice of, why did the illustrator decide to draw him like that, and why did they decide to put that in the writing, that he's winking? What does that tell us about how he's feeling or how he's delivering that sentence? And again, you could kind of, we looked at fluency last week, you could really kind of build on how you might say that. So getting the children to read out loud, how might Mike have said that sentence? Would he really emphasize the word barely? And how would it look? So just those kind of puns and jokes, I think, work really, really well. And then on the next slide, we've also got lots and lots of jokes. This is from Bookmark's magazine called The Story Corner, which is on our website if anybody does want to go and have a look at some issues that we've got on there. And we always have the joke corner, and we try to link it in. There's usually themes with each of the magazines, but I just thought these were fantastic examples again of how vocabulary can be used to make children laugh and to kind of explore it. So I won't go through all of the jokes because I'm sure you can have a read through them for yourself, but let's say the one on the right, the top one on the right, why did the banana go to the doctor's? Because it wasn't peeling well. Again, you know, these jokes are great. They are just funny to kind of say to children, because even if you get that no response, it's still something that you can kind of have a conversation around. And why did the writer, because there's a writer that's written these jokes, why did they use the word peeling? What did they mean instead? Why is that funny? You know, all of those kinds of conversations, and it just gets them to really think about the vocabulary. So following on from that as well, it's just looking at language choice. This page is quite busy, but I wanted to try and show a few different examples of how language is obviously in everything that we read, but there's so many examples of why authors have chosen certain words or certain phrases that you can pick out. I can guarantee if you go to your bookshelf and you open your book, on any page you will be able to find an example of where an author, you could talk to a child about why that author's chosen that particular word, or how it would make the reader feel, or all of those kinds of questions that build up their knowledge and understanding of vocabulary, and just show how powerful word choice can be. So again, I've still got the bear who came to babysit on there. I just quite liked the really, really simple kind of sentence or sort of phrase that at the bottom, the bear squeezed into the driver's seat. Now, the author hasn't chosen just to write the bear got into the driver's seat. The author's chosen to use the word squeezed, and paired with the picture, you can see why he has to squeeze into the driver's seat, because he's a big bear and it's a really, really small car. And you can see that he's taking up all the space, and it's just having a conversation. I did this with a child fairly recently, and I just said, oh, which word do you think on that page tells you that it was quite a tight fit for the bear in the car? And straight away she was like, squeeze. And I said, oh, tell me a bit about the picture. How do you know that? And kind of building on those ideas of, well, that author has chosen that word specifically to show something. I think it's really great to kind of pick out those ideas. The bottom right corner, the red sort of the red box, is from another Twinkle text called Twist the Text, which is all about Little Red Riding Hood and its kind of traditional retellings of Little Red Riding Hood. So we've got, Red smelt the cupcakes before she saw them, sweet, buttery and delicious. As she bounced into the kitchen, she imagined sinking her teeth through the soft sponge for a huge bite. And I really like the idea with that children will know the story of Little Red Riding Hood, and they might be able to pick out that there's a phrase, sinking her teeth, right in the middle of that there. And you can have a discussion then about how authors might use language to foreshadow what's going to come later in the story. Obviously, this might be for slightly older children, kind of that sort of idea of foreshadowing is a little bit more advanced, but I still think you could speak to younger children and say, oh, who turns up later in the story? What happens to Granny? Can you remember? Oh, in this bit here, and you know, read the small section. Is there anything that makes you think of a wolf? And it's just those kind of ideas of just really picking out little examples. In the top right corner, sorry, Helen, we've got the Eric Carle Very Hungry Caterpillar, which I think Helen and I have shown in every single one of these, because obviously it's a fantastic resource. Just the fact that it's the language around that onomatopoeic word pop. It's got the warm sun, so not just saying the sun, kind of trying to get children to imagine being that little caterpillar and feeling the warm sun on their face. The tiny caterpillar, the very hungry caterpillar, you know, all those little word choices. And then just for the last two, so my dog has decided to start barking in this one this time. Just for the last two, there's Kid Normal is all to do with a kind of villain that's a wasp, so they've used the word buzzing, and again that's the idea of foreshadowing. And then The Haunting of Evelyn Jones is all to do, it's kind of like a children's horror story, and in that little extract there's just so many different parts of it that you could speak to the children about, the language that was being used or the way that it's set out on the page. Again, that onomatopoeia of the drip, drip, drip. and kind of the imagery that it creates as well. So you could quite easily pick out any of those examples, but I won't go through every single one because I'll get too passionate about it and end up talking for ages. So Helen and I both really wanted to include poetry in these webinars because it's such an important part of reading. It ties into every element of reading, and everything that you want to kind of get out of children through their reading, you can teach through poetry, you can pull out through poetry. So Helen showed last week about From a Railway Carriage, and kind of that idea of the language that's used in it, but also when you're reading out loud, that fluency, the kind of the expectation that it sounds like a train. So it's that kind of the hint there. I think with this kind of poem, you could do a really good activity where they could look particularly at the vocabulary, and you could just ask the questions, you know, maybe not give them the title at all, and maybe ask the question, what do you think this poem is about? And then as you start to explore that a little bit more with the children, well, what clues were there that maybe this was a train? So you've got the words like faster, charging, sights, rain. The fact that rain rhymes with train might link in the child's mind. You've got like the wink of an eye, talking about how quickly it's going past. You've got stations there, you've got the whistle, you've got all of these vocabulary choices that have been really carefully selected by Robert Louis Stevenson to show that it's a train. So even without that title, which is always a fun thing to do, I think, if you hide the title of a poem and then say to the child, what would you call this? I think it's always a great way to kind of gauge their understanding as well. And then The Highwayman, which is a personal favourite of mine. It's a fantastic narrative poem, and I've done it with children so many times. And although the language is slightly older and kind of maybe a bit more advanced for children, they do get the idea really, really quickly. And this opening stanza of the poem, I just think shows such a strong power in words of how you can create an image really clearly in your mind. So for this one, for example, we've got ghostly galleon, we've got gusty trees, we've got ribbon of moonlight. Those are kind of three really, really clear images saying that the moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas. Already you've kind of got that image in your head of the moon looking like a ship going through like the clouds for the cloudy seas. You've got this idea of a road being a ribbon of moonlight, and you've got the purple moor. There's just so many choices that the poet has kind of made to really, really show very, very clearly that imagery. And I think it's a great activity to just get the children to draw something once you've explored the vocabulary a little bit more. Or could you draw that? What might that look like? And that's a really nice way to explore vocabulary as well. And then I just wanted to share just a couple more things that might be some good activities that you could do with children as well, to do with vocabulary. So this is called Synonym Splat, which is where you would basically have a selection of words on a page or on a screen or on a whiteboard, however you want it. And the idea is that you would say a word to the child and they would need to find the word that has a similar meaning. So a synonym has a similar meaning as the other word. So for example, I might say joyful, and if anybody does know the answer, feel free to type it in the chat if you can see any of the words on that page that would mean the same as joyful. So you could do that and get the children to you could do it as a physical thing. So if it's on a whiteboard, thank you, Judy, yay, elated. Exactly. You could, if you could actually physically do it. I've done it with like rulers before, where they have to hit the word first. And if you could also do this instead of synonym splat, although I do really like the alliteration in synonym splat, you could also do it's nice, isn't it? You could also do antonym splat, so words that mean the opposite. So for example, if I was to say the word smooth, can anybody see the opposite? You can write it in the chat bar if you can. And again, it's just that idea of exploring. I think synonyms and antonyms are a really great kind of way to just explore vocabulary, because you start to really build on the children's vocabulary as well. Well done, Philippa. Excellent. Rough was on there for the antonym of smooth as well. So it's just a fantastic way to kind of build on their vocabulary and then start getting it into their writing and start kind of picking out of their reading as well. And then the final thing, oh, sorry, let's thank you. Good. It looks like you were going to speak, sorry. Yeah, so just the final thing, and I know I've shown this picture before, but I just wanted to show that it's not, again, not necessarily just to do with words on a page. You can develop vocabulary and you can think about the power of words through a picture as well. So if you were to show a picture like this, for example, you could just get the children to come up with as many word choices that they would make to describe what's happening in that picture. And it could be a description of what they can actually see, or it could be a description of feelings. It could be they could start to develop a story, and it could be words related to things later on in the story. But that idea of being able to use that kind of stimulus of an image to create lots and lots of vocabulary, and then develop on from that and talk about the meanings, and that still links to reading as well, really.
Brilliant, thanks Lauren, that's really helpful. Okay, let's walk you through a few more ideas around boosting word power, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So about another 10 minutes of some resource ideas. So this one is a semantic gradient, or called a cline, which I really like, the idea of clines. And it's very simply that you look at what it looks like to move from one word to another. So you've got two ideas here between moving slow to fast, softly spoken to loud, and then sprinkling the other words around and trying to think of a progressive order that they might appear in. The lovely thing about this is it does generate talk brilliantly, because of course this is nuance. In a heartbeat, this is nuance. We are deciding whether it is quicker to meander or to stroll. There's not a right answer there particularly. You might feel it's meander, I might feel it's stroll, but it's the discussion about meaning that is so important in this activity. Moving from softly spoken to loud, is it louder to exclaim or to shout? Is it louder to mutter or to whimper? All of those conversations can be really interesting. If we had a bit more time, we might do one together, but you know, things like two polar opposites are quite helpful to generate word gradients. So moving from hot to cold, moving from happy to sad, those kinds of ideas where you've got two at either end and then you place the words in the middle can be really helpful. And you might give the words, or you might not. You might ask kids to come up with their own ideas, or you might have a collection of ideas that you order together. Both are really valuable. And to help you with that, pop over and have a look at the feelings wheel. If you haven't already spotted this resource, it's so helpful. It was actually designed for some psychology research that was happening. But we use it a lot in English teaching because it's so helpful to give us the nuance of meaning within different emotions. So you've got the key emotions around the middle, and then as you move out, they sort of become more and more nuanced. So if you look at the word angry, there's a whole range of words around anger in that middle wheel, and then that moves on again to deciding whether you're furious or hostile or annoyed or skeptical or disrespectful or provoked. And all of those, of course, are nuanced versions of the concept of anger. So that feelings wheel available there on that website. Let me just let somebody else in. I'm not sure why it's not doing it automatically. Never mind. Welcome if you've just joined us. Yeah, so have a look at the feelings wheel to help you with those discussions around word power. You can use them on that word gradient we just talked about, or for 100 million other ways this might be of use to you. And certainly when it comes to expressing how characters feel or something about setting, you know, emotion is a really helpful wheel to consider. If you've seen anything that I've done before, you may well have come across this in those, but certainly these are called the Freya models on the left, or semantic or word maps on the right. And these really help us understand our thinking as well as embed vocabulary. The Freya model there is very simple. You put your keystone word in the middle, and then you try and come up with a definition, some characteristics for that word. It's quite helpful if it's a noun. For this one, example is reptiles, but that might be an abstract noun like fear, or equally it might be a character, or it might be a setting, or it might be a colour. You can play around with your keystone word quite a lot, and then you've got examples of that word and also non-examples. We sometimes in teaching call them waggles and wobbles, what a good one looks like and what a bad one looks like. So having the understanding of what it isn't can really help clarify what something is. If you know what it isn't, it does help you consider a bit more succinctly what it actually is. So the Freya model is useful, and if you Google Freya model, you'll see lots of examples that might be of use. And then that semantic map, where we begin to unpick the layers of meaning within a word. So we've got the word transportation, and then subdividing that down and subdividing that down. And the real benefit of something like a semantic map here is that really articulates thinking. And of course, that's for me one of the most important reasons behind a focus on vocabulary, because it's the vocabulary, of course, that stimulates thought, and you can't disassociate the two. And so if you're going to build a really articulate mind, the way you do that is through an articulate vocabulary. And semantic maps and semantic modeling allows you to sort of look at what that looks like visually, tangibly, and sort of take it out of your brain and onto something that we can discuss and view collaboratively, so that benefits the discussion. And this is what I wanted to talk about with etymology. So this is one of my favourite etymological facts here, is the word astronaut, which literally means star sailor, and is so beautiful because I have instantly in my head a vision of somebody in a sailboat navigating the celestial skies. You know, isn't that gorgeous? The concept that astro is from the Greek meaning star, and naut is from the Greek meaning sailor, and that's where the word comes from. And if you are looking at words and a love of words, if you are logophiles like myself and like Lauren, then there is such beauty in understanding the origin of words. And there's all sorts of different places you can go to help with that, but there's a really good website called Etymology Online, and pretty much every word you want to look at, you just put in their search engine and it will tell you the origins of that word. And there is absolute treasure to be found in unpicking the roots of our language. So for instance, the word thesaurus. If you're interested in vocabulary and you've got a thesaurus, or you go online for a thesaurus and you find the synonyms and you find extra meaning around a word, that word thesaurus literally comes from the Greek meaning for treasure. So a thesaurus is literally a treasure trove. It's literally a treasure chest. And there's so many layers of meaning there. And if you're interested in vocabulary, that really stimulates curiosity. And if we are curious, then we're learning. So have a look at the huge benefit that there is behind etymology. And actually, this is something we're working on really hard in Chatterstars at the minute. We've got a whole new puzzle range coming out, all to do with etymology. That will be launching either just before or just after Christmas.
That's gorgeous though, isn't it? Astronaut, that's really beautiful.
I know. It's so nice. You can just see him in his little sailboat.
Yeah, you can.
I think, was it in the Night Garden where they used to sail off and the sea then became the stars, and that was like just like that.
It's lovely.
That was when my kids were little and cute. So there's a lot of research, and I work quite a lot with Oxford University Press, and certainly the reports that they have published, there's some evidence from Dr. Jessie Ricketts in those research documents that if we can see a word at the same time as it's being spoken, it improves our spelling of that word, but it also improves the chance of it embedding. So whilst we're having discussions, whilst we're talking and capturing great language and great vocabulary, write it down, have it written somewhere. And I love this idea that you might have a little speech bubble on a stick, and you can, you know, that's obviously a whiteboard. You can just write up keywords there, what's being spoken, but have your post-it notes at home, stick them on the fridge. If someone says a great word, jot it down, make sure we know what it means, put it up. You might have tables you can write on just quickly, something that can then just be wiped away easily. You might want to put up those magic whiteboards that just stick to the wall. Have you seen those? They just like really thin whiteboard material, and somehow through the magic of science it sticks to the wall with no glue, and you can jot stuff down there, but have, you know, vibrant and organic kind of ways to capture words visually, because we know that that is a better way for it to embed. And all of those elements that we've just been talking about are how we capture puzzles for Chatterstars. So we look at synonym, we look at compound words, it's playing games with words, it's making sure that we can capture them visually. We have semantic gradients on there, we have antonym, we have lots of stuff around idiom. So if you haven't yet had a quick look, then go and get yourselves a free trial and see if you think that would help you embed vocabulary. Because that's really what helps reading success. That broad underpinning knowledge of vocabulary, of syntax, allows that reading success to really flourish. So that's it. That was our autumn series. Those are the webinars that we've been running. If you've missed any of them, they're on our YouTube channel, so go and have a look at those. If you scan that QR code, which I've cleverly created as a star,
Wow.
that will take you straight to the YouTube channel. So you can have a look at those. If you follow us, then you'll know that you won't miss out on any. But those webinars are all available if you scan that QR code there with your phone.